between sentences and paragraphs. The conference room smelled of panic. Doctors, nurses, and top specialists had rushed in, but their faces all carried the same grim look. The CEO of North Star Industries, Evelyn Cartera, was dying. She had built an empire, feeding tens of thousands of families with her company, but now she lay pale and trembling, her body shutting down after a rare complication from surgery. "We need a compatible donor. Now." The lead doctor's voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. Her team, her friends, even her estranged family had been tested. Everyone had failed. Time was running out. And in a broken bar the sliding doors opened. A man in worn jeans and a faded army jacket walked in, holding his daughter's hand. His name was Daniel Hayes, a veteran, a single father, a man who had given his best years to his country and now lived paycheck to paycheck fixing cars. He hadn't come for her. He hadn't even known who Evelyn Carter was. He was only there because his little girl, Lily, had heard the commotion and insisted they sign up to help. "Daddy," Lily had whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "What if it was me lying there? Wouldn't you want someone to try?" That was all it took. Daniel offered his arm, not knowing that his blood carried the rare marker they needed. Not knowing that within minutes, hope would flicker back to life in that sterile room. The transfusion began. And for the first time in hours, Evelyn Carter's heart rate steadied. Color crept back into her face. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Bo Broken Bar, who saved me?" They pointed to him, the man standing quietly in the corner, brushing his daughter's hair out of her eyes. That was their first meeting. The days that followed were nothing short of extraordinary. Evelyn was used to people treating her like a machina, an endless source of wealth, power, and decisions. But Daniel treated her like a person. He didn't know her boardroom victories or her Forbes cover stories. He only knew she was someone who almost slipped away, someone his blood had brought back. When she asked why he stepped forward, his answer was simple. "Because I could. And because he glanced at Lilia, reminded me what matters most." Evelyn found herself smiling for the first time in years. But fate wasn't done weaving its threads. As Evelyn recovered, her company's investors began circling like vultures, ready to exploit her weakened state. Headlines screamed about her fragile health and leadership uncertainty. One evening, she confided in Daniel, "I built everything from nothing, but now Broken Bar, I don't even know who to trust." He didn't give her corporate advice. He didn't talk about strategy. He just said, "You trusted me when you didn't even know my name. Trust yourself the same way." It was the kind of wisdom she hadn't heard in boardrooms filled with billionaires. And it lit a fire in her heart. The turning point came weeks later, at a charity gala Evelyn had once dreaded attending. She arrived not with her usual entourage but with Daniel and Lily by her side. The whispers were instant. Who is he? Why is she with him? Evelyn ignored them. When she stepped up to the microphone, she did something no one expected. She told the world the truth. "That man right there," she said, pointing to Daniel, "saved my life. Not with wealth. Not with status. But with kindness." The crowd fell silent. Cameras flashed. And then, applause erupted, raw, thunderous, genuine. Daniel, usually so composed, looked down, cheeks flushed. Evelyn's eyes locked on his, and for the first time, she realized what her second chance at life truly meant. It wasn't about the company. It wasn't about survival. It was about love. Love that came not from the high towers of business, but from a man who had lost much, given more, and never asked for anything in return. Months later, Evelyn walked into a small-town school auditorium. On stage, Lily was performing in a school play, her voice shaky but proud. Danielle sat in the crowd, recording her every word with the devotion only a father could give. Evelyn slid into the empty seat beside him. Without looking away from the stage, she whispered, "Danielle Broken Bar, I don't want just your blood in my veins. I want your heart and my life." His hand trembled as it found hers. And when Lily spotted them holding hands from the stage, she beamed so brightly it lit the whole room. From that day forward, Evelyn Carter was no longer the CEO who survived against the odds. She was the woman who discovered that the greatest wealth isn't in power or profit but in kindness, family, and love. And Danielle Hayes, the single Evelyn Carter, wasn't the kind of woman to believe in fate. She believed in numbers, contracts, and the sheer force of willpower. That's how she had become one of the most powerful CEOs in America. But after Danielle's blood coursed through her veins and pulled her back from death, something inside her shifted. Every time she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw only the CEO. She saw the fragile woman who had almost left the world too soon. And every time she closed her eyes, she remembered his daughter's tiny hand clinging to his arm, a broken bar, the quiet strength in his eyes, a broken bar, and the warmth of a man who asked for nothing, even after giving everything. Weeks after her recovery, Evelyn asked Danielle and Lily to visit her at her estate. Her mansion was enormous, the kind people whispered about in magazines, but Daniel didn't look impressed. In fact, he looked uncomfortable, as though the marble floors and chandeliers didn't belong to people like him. Lily, on the other hand, ran through the halls with wide-eyed wonder. Evelyn laughed for the first time in months as she chased her down a hallway lined with oil paintings. Daniel crossed his arms, smiling faintly. "You know," he said, "Lily's never been anywhere this fancy. She thinks your house is a castle." Evelyn looked at him, her smile fading into something softer. "Maybe it's been missing its king and princess all along." The words slipped out before she could stop them. And Danielle, stoic, cautious, a man hardened by years of service, he actually blushed. But love, as Evelyn soon discovered, wasn't going to be easy. The board of North Star Industries began to question her every move. They called Danielle a distraction, a nobody unworthy of being near her. At one heated meeting, an executive sneered, "With all due respect, Miss Carter, you cannot run a global empire while entertaining a charity case who changes oil for a living." Evelyn's hand slammed the table. "That man saved my life. He's worth more than every dollar in this company." The room went silent. For once, her heart spoke louder than her title. One evening, weeks later, Evelyn visited Danielle's modest home for dinner. The little house smelled of garlic bread and laughter. Lily had set the table with mismatched plates, proud of her work. For Evelyn, it was the most alive she had felt in years. No catered dishes, no polished servants, saw just warmth. "Sorry it's not 5-star, Danielle said, handing her a plate. Evelyn shook her head, blinking back unexpected tears. "Danielle, a broken bar, this is better than 5-star. This feels like home." The emotional climax came one night when Evelyn received devastating news, a hostile takeover attempt. If she lost, thousands of employees would lose their jobs. Danielle found her pacing, eyes red, whispering, "I can't fight them. They'll win. I don't have the strength anymore." He stepped forward, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Yes, You do. You already survived worse. You survived death itself. And you didn't do it alone, you did it with us. With me. With Lily. For the first time in her life, Evelyn realized her strength didn't come from being untouchable. It came from being loved. And the next morning, she walked into that boardroom and not alone, but with Daniel by her side. Her voice shook the walls, not from anger, but from conviction. "You want to take my company?" she said. "Try. But you'll never take my heart. And that heart belongs to the man who saved me." The investors backed down. For once, money couldn't compete with truth. Months later, Broken Bar. At Lily's school, the little girls' play was about family and courage. Evelyn sat in the audience, her hand resting quietly in Daniel's. When the play ended, Lily bowed, grinning ear to ear. She spotted them together in the crowd and shouted loud enough for the whole auditorium to hear. "Daddy, Miss Evelyn, are you going to get married now?" The crowd laughed. Evelyn's cheeks flushed. Daniel scratched his neck awkwardly. But then Evelyn leaned in close, her voice trembling with honesty. "Danielle, Broken Bar, maybe she's right. Maybe it's time." And in the middle of that school auditorium, with paper props and children cheering, Daniel took Evelyn's hand and whispered the words she never expected to hear again. "I almost lost you once. I don't ever want to risk losing you again. Will you marry me?" Her answer came in a tearful laugh as she pulled him close. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." From that day on, Evelyn Carter was no longer just a CEO. She was a woman who had discovered the priceless wealth of family. And Daniel Hayes, the single dad veteran, was no longer just a man who gave his blood. He was the man who gave her life a second chance, a broken bar, and her heart, forever. Veteran became not just her hero, a broken bar, but her forever.